Hello, everybody, and welcome to our weekly question and answer. I'm your host, Jasper Blake, head coach here at the My Endurance Hub platform. If you've joined us before, you'll know what you're getting into. If you haven't, if this is your first time, welcome. This is a great session. We've had some amazing questions in the last 2 weeks. It's been really fun to address some of those questions. And I love the different things people throw at us. And like I always say, there's no such thing as a silly question. If you're a beginner, we were all beginners at some point and we all had questions. So please feel free and open to answer or to ask anything that comes to mind in the endurance space. Housekeeping. You can watch all of these question and answers. They're recorded, and then we post them at the My Endurance Hub space. So if you want to rewatch them, if there's something you want to watch again, or maybe you have a friend that has some similar questions and you think it would be valuable for them, please definitely send them our way. If you do have a question, the easiest place to put it is in the chat function. You can also use the raise your hand function, but I pay attention to the chat there and I see everything pretty clearly there. So please put your questions in there and I'll answer them in the order that they come in. And I see some questions popping in there already, which is great. Nice to see some familiar faces here. Looks like Jason's back, which is great. And who else do we have in here? Kevin and Aiden. Awesome. Nice to see you all again, and thanks for joining us again. I think without further ado, let's get cracking here. So first question from Jason. He says, "Hey Jasper, how much should I eat on my long bike rides?" Really great question. The best way to think about it is we have about 60 to 90 minutes of stored muscle glycogen. So we can get away with no food really for about 60 to 90 minutes. Certainly when we get above 90 minutes, we need to start replacing some of the carbohydrate that we're using. Intensity is a factor. So if you're going for a really hard bike ride for an hour and a half, you're definitely going to use up most of your carbohydrate stores. If it's endurance based, if it's a slower ride, you can get away with a little longer. But a good rule of thumb to start with, and I always tell people the most important macronutrient that you can focus on is carbohydrate. That's our limiter. We have enough fat reserves on our bodies to go for a very, very long time. Fat is very calorically dense, and when we pull energy from there, we have a long time with that. But carbohydrate, much more finite. We run out of that very quickly. So that's the thing we need to replace. That's why sports drinks are, water, sodium, and carbohydrate or sugar. That's the thing we need to replace. So what I like to tell people is start with 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. That's 60 grams. So an energy drink or a gel or a bar, they'll always list the grams of carbohydrate on there, and you can start there. A sport drink typically is going to be anywhere from about 30 probably to 40 grams of carbs. And in the mixing instructions, that'll be roughly per bottle. So if your bottle is 500 to 750 milliliters, like a standard bike water bottle, if you're having a sport drink in a bottle, you're going to get 30 to 40 of grams of your 60 gram of carbs per hour if you drink a full bottle in an hour. Now 60 is at the lower end, just to be clear. I like people to start there because if you take too much on early on and you're not really used to eating on a bike ride, it can feel a little funky on your gut, but 60 is pretty safe. So let's say your bike ride is 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. If you can get in the habit of sipping on that energy drink about every 5 to 10 minutes so that you're through a bottle in an hour, there's your 30 or 40 grams. And then you need to add a little bit. So you can add a little bit with a gel or with a bar. Gels typically have about 25 grams of carbohydrate. Bars can be anywhere from 30 to 40 grams. So you could be a bottle of sport drink and a gel is probably going to get you there. A bottle of sport drink and half a bar is going to get you there. if you are not used to eating while you're working out, it's going to feel a little weird at first to be putting that into your system. But we train the gut. The gut gets used to it. We get really efficient at, taking what we need from that energy source, and then it allows us to keep going. So hopefully that answers your question, Jason. Start with about 60 grams. And then as you train your gut, as you get better at it, you can inch that up a little bit. We don't really ever want to exceed about 90 grams, although some people can. But that's kind of the range that you can fit into. And you can see how that goes. Hopefully that helped, Jason. Jason also had another question. Thanks, Jason. What are some ways I can keep from getting injured when running? Okay, so little statistic for you. I'm making this up. I don't know if this is actually true, but there is a statistic that says 100% of people who run will get injured. I don't know if that's actually true, but injury rates are very high. And that's because running is very high impact. Think about it. You're taking your body weight, you're throwing it up in the air, you're landing on one foot, and you're doing it over and over and over and over and over again. So the first way that you can sort of mitigate injury is to be really progressive with your running. If you're new to running, don't suddenly think you're going to go run 100K in a week. It's the worst mistake you can make. Start off very gently. If I have a new athlete that really has never run before, we will start with a walk-run program. So we're doing little bits of walking, little bits of running, little bits of walking, little bits of running. And what that does is it really manages the impact load that's going through the body. So that's one strategy, is to be progressive, starting slowly. So starting a run program, it's the same as being progressive. You just don't want to throw a whole bunch of runs into 1 week, but people do that because they're super keen. They're like, I want to do a 10K or I want to do a half marathon, and they get super keen. And in that first week, they just throw themselves in there full gas, and then their body can't handle it. Another little strategy early on is to separate each run by a day of no running. It doesn't mean you don't have to do exercise. You can do biking, you can do other stuff. But give yourself, a day in between. So you run Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and take the weekend off. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So 3 runs a week. That's a great place to start. You're giving yourself a day in between each of those runs. Again, it's all about managing what we call impact stress. That's the big limiter for people, and the thing they have to build up a tolerance for. So be progressive. Manage impact stress by having a day in between. That's a great one. Make sure you have the right shoes for you. So go to a little local shoe retailer with knowledgeable staff, and usually they'll look at your feet, they'll look at your running gait, and then they'll recommend some shoes that are best suited for you. So that's another thing you can do. Those are probably 3. That's a good place to start. Those 3 right there. And hopefully that'll help stave off some injuries for you. Thanks for the question, Jason. Kevin says, I just bought some goggles for swimming, but they're polarized. I actually can't see that well with them. Is there a type or brand of goggles you'd recommend? That is a really good question. Thanks, Kevin. So just like sunglasses, goggles have evolved to the point where we have, lots of different options in terms of lens color and shape and size. And so you should select the goggle tint or the goggle lens based on the conditions. So when I was racing, I'd have 3 or 4 pairs of goggles at the ready. And depending on the conditions in the morning, I would choose different ones. So if we had really gray skies and low light and maybe even some fog in the morning, I would use a brighter tinted lens, like a yellow or a red, so that it allowed me to, be a little clearer. If it was sunny, especially if I was in a race where I knew, one of the directions I was swimming in would be straight into the sun, then, maybe a darker polarized lens would be more beneficial for that. But certainly if you use a polarized lens, they're quite dark. And if you use that in low light conditions anyway, it is quite difficult to see. So my recommendation to you would be either online or, again, at a local retailer that maybe sells swim goggles. Those are harder to come by, to be honest, these days, is like a swim shop, a specific swim shop. But they should have a goggles section with multiple lens colors, and those lenses will be, for various different light conditions. So I would recommend, if budget allows, to maybe have a couple different pairs that you can choose from based on the conditions. Is there a type or brand that I recommend? Well, yeah, there's a lot of brands that are really good. And just like shoes or just like bikes, you have to really find the one that suits you the best. So I had certain goggle brands that just didn't fit my face. Like no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get them to sort of fit around like in my eye sockets, because we're all different. We all have slightly different, facial structures. But I had other brands that were just awesome. I could pop them on. I almost didn't even need the strap. Like they just fit so perfectly in my eye sockets. And I would usually, get 5 or 10 pairs of those so that I didn't have to think about it. I didn't want to ever not be able to find them, if that makes sense. Some of the coolest technology that's coming out now, and I wish I could remember the brand. I'll track it down. But there is a goggle brand now that I believe does a facial scan, and then they make the goggles custom to your face. And I don't know if there's an AI component. I'm not sure how they're doing it, but it is technology that exists. And there is a goggle company that literally you'll scan the face, and the goggles that come are fully customized for your face, which is pretty next level. You probably pay quite handsomely for that. But if you have trouble finding a goggle that works for you, that might be a great way to go. And certainly a pretty cool advancement in the space of goggles. So, Kevin, thank you for that question. I hope that helped. Kevin asks, I'd like to do more open water swims, but I don't have a buddy that can come with me. Is there a safe way for me to swim on my own? Well, here's what I'll say. I highly recommend never swimming alone in open water. I don't think it's a good practice to do. There's just too much that can go wrong. If you're in a pool, there's lifeguards, there's other people around. It's much safer. No matter how competent you are at swimming, if you have a wetsuit, if you have one of these floaty swim buoy things that goes behind so people can see, even with all that stuff, there's just too much to go wrong. We need air to breathe. And if anything happens out there and you're on your own, it's just not cool. So I say if it's open water, you should never swim alone. Just make a habit of that. I don't think it's a good idea. That said, I'm a total hypocrite. When I was a teenager, guess what I would do? Throw my wetsuit on and go swim alone. But that was when the consequence part of my brain was very small. And that's why I paid more for car insurance and all that stuff. Don't ever swim alone in open water. Don't recommend it at all. But thanks for the question. Sorry if that ruins your, your motivation or whatever to go swim in a lake by yourself. Don't do it. Aiden, I've been eating a lot of the Builder Cliff protein bars, but I just noticed they're really high in sugar. Is that okay? Well, yeah, it depends what the goal of that bar is. So I think on maybe the last Q&A, we talked about how post-workout, one of the things you actually do need is replacement of carbohydrate, and carbohydrate is basically just sugar. Sugars come in different forms. I like people to stay away from really refined sugars, but we do need to replace our carbohydrate stores, especially if we've done a hard workout that's demanded a lot of carbohydrate reserves. And then the protein is also helpful as well. So as a post-workout bar, it's maybe not a bad thing. But as a snack kind of day to day, it's probably not the best option. I'm not sure what kind of sugars they're using in there. But yeah, there's other ways I think that are maybe a little healthier to get your carbohydrate intake, like fruits and vegetables, sweet potatoes, that kind of thing have more complex carbohydrates typically. So, as a one-off post hard workout, sure, it sounds okay. But as a day-to-day snack, I'd sort of limit the amount of that kind of nutrition that you take in. Highly processed that stuff as well, usually. So I like people outside of nutrition during swimming, biking, running, to eat real food. I think it's a much healthier way to go when we eat real whole food. It's packaged in a way that slows some of that carbohydrate down. So if you think of like an apple, for example, there's fiber in there, there's water in there, there's lots of other stuff in there that kind of is healthier for us rather than something that's really, really refined. So Aiden, hopefully that helps a little bit. Aiden says, I recently had a gait analysis done and I'm now trying to run differently, but it's really hard to remember to do it while training. Do you have any tips for how to stay focused on good form? I really like this question. I think people underestimate how important some of the technical side of running is because we take it for granted. We grow up running, as kids we run, and typically kids actually run very well. And as we grow into adulthood, we become a little less awesome at running. Here's what I would say. With the gait analysis, if you were given some key little running tips, like some things that you need to do, write them down on a little piece of paper, and maybe put that by your shoes or somewhere where just before your run, you can be reminded of those 2 or 3 little technical cues that are important for you. And then you can work on that. Just having that little reminder and being mindful of it before you actually lace up and head out for that run can be really, really helpful. I don't know if that helps, but I think, again, just being reminded of it with frequency is a good idea. In some of the programs that we build out at the My Endurance Hub, I don't think there's one run workout in there that I don't have some technical cues for people so that when they read the workout, the last thing they see are 4 or 5 technical cues for them to think about as they head out for that run. Thanks for the question, Aiden. Kevin says, I'm running my first sprint try next weekend, and I'm not sure about what to wear, and I don't want to look stupid. I'll be swimming in a pool. Should just wear my bathing suit for the bike and run? Also, Speedo, yes, no, haha. Love it. Okay, well, look, Kevin, congrats, first of all, on signing up for your first sprint try. I think that's just awesome. Secondly, you are entering the wonderful world of spandex. You need to embrace the spandex if you're a triathlete. It's awesome. If you are swimming in a pool, use a swimsuit. And then you can, usually in triathlon events, you have to have your torso covered as well. So a triathlon suit that is designed for swimming will cover the torso and the bottom. They come sometimes in 2 pieces, sometimes in 1 piece. At the World Cup level, so the highest level, which is always a good place to kind of look because whatever they're wearing will be the fastest thing that you can wear. And they're typically wearing, the men and women are typically wearing a 1-piece suit. And in fact, I think at World Cup level, it's regulated now. I think they have to wear a certain style of suit. But those suits are very fast in the water. So for your sprint try, I would get, if you're a little shy about having like one of those old school hardcore Speedos, if you don't want to wear that, you can get what are called jammer shorts. I don't know if they're still called jammer shorts, but Speedo makes a version of them. If you go, if you have a aquatic facility that you swim at, usually if there's a little store there or something, they'll sell this kind of stuff. But they're a little longer in the leg. They look a little more like a bike short. And that would be your best option for sure. It's a little, I don't know how the right way to say it. It's a little less revealing. Like the old hardcore Speedos are pretty small. And you have to be very courageous to wear those. But if you're an Olympic swimmer, go for it. It's awesome. But I would get the jammer shorts. They're very fast in the pool. And then you have to consider, well, what am I going to wear on top? Well, first of all, recognize that when your body is wet, it's quite difficult to get anything on. Like it's, if you've ever tried to put a shirt on or something when you're wet, it's difficult. But a bike jersey or, I would just get like a spandex top if that's available. Like if the swim store that you're looking at has triathlon suits, I would just get a little triathlon suit. Or, it's your first one. And if you're just there to finish it, throw on a bike jersey or a running top or something like that, and that'll be good. You'll save you a bit of money. A lot of times that stuff's, pretty pricey as well. So I hope that answered your question, Kevin. go with a jammer short if you can find it. I'll see if I can find one and maybe post it in the discussion at the My Endurance Hub. Kevin says, whoa, that sounds cool. The future of goggles. Oh, yeah. Referring back to scanning your face to get a custom goggle. Yeah, super cool. I wish I'd had that when I was racing. I mean, that's like new technology, and it's very, very cool. Aiden says, I've really only been training for the cycling event with a stationary bike. What are the big differences between being on the road versus stationary for biking? My race is soon. Do you think I'd be okay? Well, a couple things. First, know that if you're indoors on a stationary trainer, it's a super efficient way to get fit. That's really, really awesome if you've been doing that. There's lots of control there. Generally, the effort can be a bit higher because we can control the resistance of that bike. It usually gets a little warmer inside, so you'll get that bit of heat stress, which is really nice for fitness as well. So lots of good things in terms of fitness. Now, where I'll stray from that is it's really important that you get comfortable on a bike outside. So before your race, I would encourage you to get out on your bike so that you feel safe on your bike. And you don't want to show up at the race and be the first time riding out on a road. That's not wise. You should really be spending some time outside. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. I don't know how soon your race is, but if it's certainly in the next week or two, you need to get outside on your bike. So the first time isn't in a race, but fitness wise, you'll probably be great. So that's good. He asks this is Aiden as well. What are the big differences between being on the road versus stationary? I think I answered that. Again, indoor riding or stationary riding is very effective for building fitness. Outdoor riding just feels a bit different. You have to learn to manage the bike, and that's very important as well. So those are probably the biggest differences. Kevin says, thanks. That's all right. Better to be safe. Oh, yeah. Regarding swimming on your own in the lake, yeah, definitely better to be safe than sorry. Gosh, you just know. I never know, like swallow some water and get a little panic attack. I mean, you never know what can happen out there. And it's way better to be safe. Kevin says, what's a good result for a first-time triathlete in a sprint try? I'm thinking 14 to 15 minutes for the swim, 25 minutes for the bike, and 25 to 30 minutes for the run. So, well, it depends what the distance is. Time is always a little tricky with triathlon because even when the distances are consistent, it's hard to know what the course looks like. And maybe it was hot, and maybe it was hilly, and maybe it was windy. So I wouldn't get too hung up on times. It's nice to kind of have some times and maybe have a threshold that you're trying to beat. If, sprint tries generally are 750 meter swim, 20K bike, 5K run. So I would say your swim time for a first timer, that looks fairly reasonable. 25 minutes for a 20K bike is absolutely barreling fast. That's very, very fast. I wouldn't necessarily hang your hopes on going that quick unless you're like an Uber biker. I don't want to downplay where you might be at, but that's a 50-minute 40K, and there's probably not too many people in the world that I think would go that fast. There's a few. So you may be a little over ambitious on that one. And then 25 to 30 minutes for the run seems also very reasonable. I would say for that distance of sprint try, maybe about a 40-minute bike. And then the other two are about the same. So maybe like say an hour and a half, hour 20 to hour 40 might be a good thing to target for. Really what I would do though, Kevin, is focus on effort. It sounds a bit cliche, but that's all you can control. You might end up at a course that's straight uphill on the bike. I don't know. And then the bike time might be very slow. Focus on effort. For sprint try, you can kind of be bumping up against that second threshold. So let's say 75 to 85% of perceived effort is a good place to hang out. And then your time will be what your time will be. Sounds a little vague, eh? Sorry, Kevin. Can't give you an exact time. Okay. Good question, though. Aiden, I've had a few minor injuries in my training, hamstring, quad, groin pulls, and I've been going to a physio often. Good. My physiotherapist uses needles to help heal the muscle. It seems to work, and I'm wondering why or how. Also, is this legit or pseudoscience like cupping for chiropractors? Yeah, great question. I will do my best to answer. I always pre-qualify answers about anything medical, that I am not a doctor, I'm not a chiro, I'm not a physio. If, legit concerns, you should really advise with those individuals. But here's what I understand about needling. If it is the IMS needling and it's not acupuncture needles, they're two different things. IMS is intramuscular, musculoskeletal, I don't know, intermuscular stimulation, maybe. I don't even know that. Regardless, I've had it a lot too. Very, very effective. Here is my uneducated understanding of what's happening there. When the needle goes into the muscle, it goes in quite deep. And what it does is it triggers a healing response. So that actually does a bit of damage very deep into the muscle. And it triggers the body or stimulates the body to create healing in that area. That is my best guess at what's going on there. And from what I remember my own physio saying about it. But I think we should do more research on that one just to make sure I'm not completely off. But what I will say, I don't think it's pseudoscience at all. I too have personally had tremendous results in healing using that technique, if it's IMS that you're talking about. Kevin says, so I shouldn't wear my Borat bathing suit. Actually, you know what, Kevin? I think you should. That was a beauty of a suit. Speedos aren't maybe, quite that revealing. I'm not sure if those, fluorescent green straps that Borat wore qualify as covering the torso. You might get in a bit of trouble for that. So maybe no, I would look for a triathlon suit. Aiden says, is there a professional triathlon series for older and aging athletes? Like, could you still be competing in an older age category? Or if I keep training hard in my 40s, could I make the pros? Haha. So maybe, Aiden, what you're referring to is like the seniors golf tour, or I don't know if there's a senior tennis tour as well. I know the senior golf tour, they still make a really good living doing that. As far as I know in triathlon, that is not the case. However, there's a very robust and awesome age group scene in triathlon. In fact, arguably or not arguably, that is what supports the sport. If you go to an Ironman, there'll be 2,000 or 3,000 people on the start line, and there might be 50 to 100 pros, and the rest are age groupers. And those age groupers are paying full entry fees. They're booking the hotels. They're, buying all the merchandise. So, really our sport, especially in Ironman, is supported by the age group contingent, but they're not really making any money. However, maybe, if you're a 55-year-old age grouper with 100,000 followers on Instagram, maybe you're making money that way and getting some sponsorship. I mean, that kind of landscape has changed considerably. That's one way to maybe be a quasi pro or make some money if you have a big social following. But in terms of prize money, no. As far as I know, no. But if there is, I better find out. Maybe it's time for a comeback. That's a good question, though. I like that. I think we should advocate for that. It would be pretty fun, and maybe might motivate me to get back out there. That'd be pretty cool. Jason says, is there a maximum time to finish an event like a triathlon? For example, what is the max time you have to finish the swim, run, and bike? I love this question because the answer is definitely yes, especially in Ironman events. I'm not 100% sure for shorter distance, like, the pros obviously don't have to worry about those time cutoffs. But in Ironman and half Ironman events, yes, they have swim cutoff, bike cutoff, run cutoff. I can't remember exactly what they are. I know in Ironman, it's 17 hours for the full thing. I think the swim cutoff for Ironman is 2 hours and 20 minutes, but I could be wrong. And then there'll be a bike cutoff as well. And then obviously the run cutoff is basically the end of the race cutoff. So yes, there are time things that you have to make. And one of the most inspiring things at those races is seeing the people who are very close to making those cutoffs. Because sometimes you'll have somebody who's like, they're right on the bubble of making that swim cutoff. And maybe they have a minute left and they'll be, they're running up the beach to get across that timing mat. And there'll be like thousands of people just screaming at them to do it. It's so exciting. So yes, there are time cutoffs. The bike one for Ironman is probably closely tied to daylight, like They want people to be off the bike while it's still safe. That would be part of it, I think. So yes, there are. And if you feel like you're somebody who's going to be on the bubble, it's really important to check what those cutoffs are. So you know where you stand and what you need to do. Jason says, like, if you can't run, can you somehow walk the run portion? Or yeah, so for sure. For Ironman, I mean, there's a lot of people who end up kind of walking or walk running the marathon. But it's, 17 hours, pretty healthy time cutoff. Let's say you swim an hour and a half, and let's say you even bike 8 hours, which would be like, a very conservative bike. 9.5 hours, you still have 7.5 hours to get through a marathon. And if you walk run that, you'll get it done. So yes, people will often be walking the marathon and make the cutoff, no problem. Where you're at risk of making the overall cutoff of 17 hours is really if you're at the risk of making all those other individual cutoffs. And there are people I've seen, as I said, some of the most inspiring finish lines I've ever seen are, this person who's got, 5 minutes until midnight. It's always midnight. 17 hours is the cutoff. And, they're barely going to make it. And sometimes they'll make it by, 5, 6, 7 seconds. And that finish line is jam packed with people trying to get them there. It's very, very cool and inspiring and amazing. Aiden says, what happens if I need to stop at any point in my race? Is that okay? Well, yeah, for sure. It depends what you're, stopping for. If you have a mechanical issue that you need to fix, if you maybe need to go to the bathroom, there's lots of reasons why you might want to stop, especially in a long distance race. And it's totally fine to stop. What you cannot do though, is have outside assistance. So you can't stop and, have someone come up to you and give you a pizza or something like that. Yeah. So of course you can stop, you can take a little break. At the aid stations, in the big races, they usually have porta potties if you need to use the bathroom, that kind of thing. So yes, it's the longer the race goes, the more likely and probable and frequent it is that people will have little reprieves. I'll share a really fun story with you. When I was one of the Ironmans I did, I think I finished second or third or something. And I was I come through the finish. I'd done all that stuff. And then I was in the medical area or the massage area. I was getting massage. And this is like an hour after I had finished. And there was a guy beside me, and we were chatting, and I said, how was your race? How did it go? He's like, how was my race? I'm in transition right now. He's like, I just finished the bike and I came in here to get my legs worked on. If you think about it, I finished in about 8.5 hours. And so I was probably in there at about 9 hours on the clock. And this guy's just coming in from the bike and he's getting his legs worked on before he heads out. And it's a 17-hour cutoff. So he's still got 8 hours to do that run. And I got a kick out of that. And he basically looked at me with a little bit of disdain because I think I told him that I was already finished. Kevin says, what if I really need to go to the bathroom during the race? Where can I go? I've seen some ugly, gross finishes, and I don't want that to happen to me. I have a whole blog post I wrote years ago about how and when it's appropriate to actually just go to the bathroom in your shorts. And my criteria is you're allowed to go to the bathroom if you are, in the hunt to get an Olympic gold medal or any of the 3 medals at the Olympics. You can do whatever you need to make that happen, because that's a life changer. Same if you're going to be on the podium at a world championship, then feel free to go to the bathroom whenever you need. I'm divulging too much. So those are the criteria. Like if you're going for something big or there's a huge paycheck on the line, you do whatever you need to do. And there's no shame in that, in my humble opinion. However, if you're mortal, like most people, there are aid stations that usually have porta potties. It's exceptionally bad form to pull over and go to the bathroom in someone's front yard. Please don't do that. That's just not cool. It gives us all a bad name. But, sometimes these long races, they're taking they're taking part in parks, or, in transitions, they'll have a whole bunch of porta potties. There are lots of opportunities for you to, find and use a bathroom in an appropriate way. Okay, where were we? That's my favorite question we've had in all the talks. Kevin, you don't want that to happen to you. Well, it depends what's on the line, Kevin. Gosh, if you're going to win an Olympic gold medal, do what you have to do. No one's going to shame you for that. That's like the best Olympic medal winning story you'll ever have. Okay, I'll leave it there. Jason says, if you ran 10K today, how fast do you think you could run it in Jasper? I think I'd still be under 40 minutes for sure, but it would be very painful. I get further and further removed, and I don't do a ton of, speed work or tempo work. But when I was racing, certainly I could take for granted a pretty fast 10K, and in the grand scheme of being a triathlete fast, not runner fast. But now I'm pretty sure I could still go under 40 minutes. That would be a nice little target I think I could hit. Jason says, wow, that's my goal, 17 hours. Maybe referring back to what the time cutoffs are for Ironman. Yeah, you know what? That's awesome. Just finishing that thing, there is nothing wrong with being 16 and a half, 17 hours. And in fact, like I said, the people who come in right around 17 hours are the biggest heroes. I mean, I can't imagine being out there for that long, and people do it. And they're just wonderful. I mean, it's such a testament to the human spirit when you see the people coming across in that last hour. It's really, really quite beautiful to witness. It's really cool. Jason says, I've done 49 minutes. Is that for that? I think that's for the 10K. Yeah, I have a little goal. My goal is to be able to, definitely run, if I'm 40, to be able to run under 40, if I'm 50, to be able to run under 50. But given that I was kind of pro triathlete for many years, I have it 10 minutes quicker. So when I'm 50, I want to be able to run under 40. When I'm 60, I want to be able to run under 50. When I'm 70, I want to be able to run under 60. I think those are my little 10K goals. I think that's a good one. Aiden says, it's likely to be pretty hot for my race. Is there a waterproof sunscreen that you use? Or how do I make sure the sunscreen doesn't run into my eyes when I sweat? Whew, okay, well, this is a good question. So you're doing a sprint try. It's indoor in a pool. So you don't necessarily need sunscreen in there. And then the sprint, it's long enough that you could get a pretty good sunburn. So you could towel off after the pool and then just apply sunscreen there. There are waterproof sunscreens, I think. I don't know if Kinesis has a great lineup of products. That's good. You could check there, or, you could go to any drugstore and probably find something that's appropriate. I'm not sure how keen the aquatic facility is going to be if you lather up with sunscreen and then jump in their pool, but I'm not sure the rules around that. There are good sunscreens now designed for, working out, and they shouldn't run into your eyes, but yeah, that's always a risk. I think you have to kind of play around with a few different brands and see what's going to work best for you. Jason says 10K. Not sure what he means there, but you've done 49 minutes for 10K. Yeah, thanks, Jason. That's really great. That's awesome, dude. So good. Yeah, that's great. It's really nice to have that threshold. It'd be kind of a bummer if you were like 50:01. 49 is much nicer. So good for you. I love it. Kevin says, am I allowed to listen to music during the race? Oh, that's a really good question. I don't think you are in a triathlon. Part of it's probably bike safety. They definitely don't want you having headphones in there. I don't know 100% for sure, though. The race director will let you know. But my understanding is, yes, for triathlon, you cannot listen to music. However, for running events, I think you can. I think for marathons, half marathons, I do think you can use music. It may be race dependent. I don't know if it's a broader rule. So you'll want to check that before, because gosh, that would be a real silly thing to get disqualified for if you, in fact, were not allowed to in a running event and you had, AirPods in or something. So I would just check. Maybe it's goes race to race, but triathlon for sure, I don't think you can. Kevin says, I would have loved to be under 40 for a 10K at any age. Thanks, Kev. You're boosting me up here. You're pumping my tires. I needed that today. Thank you. Kevin says, I saw your TikTok on bilateral breathing for swimming, and I'm really struggling to get a good breath on my left side. Yeah, it's hard, eh? We are, we're bilateral animals. We have right and left, and we're pretty good on both sides, but certain technical things are very difficult. I would say a couple things. One, some videos, like watching some good YouTube videos on bilateral breathing might help. You might get some tips there. Best is really to book a private session or something with a swim coach if you can, or go see a master's coach, because they can often see what you're doing wrong and help you sort it out. One thing that really helped me, though, was paying attention to how it felt and what I was doing on my good side and trying to emulate the side that was more difficult for me. So I'd always pay attention to how I do it when it feels right on this side, and then trying to get a couple of things, and that really helped me. But that's sort of how I was able to learn. I was also a very visual learner, so I could watch a video of somebody and be like, oh, okay, my body understands how that will feel. We all learn differently. Some learn, auditory, so you can explain it to them. Some visual learners, like I was, I could see it and then kind of copy it. Some are kinesthetic learners, so you have to actually put your body in those positions. So figuring that out is also important too. Like, do you need to actually get in the water with somebody and have them move your body into that position? Can you listen to instruction about it? Can you watch it? Maybe it's a combination of all those things. So learning from one side, watching videos, and then ultimately getting a lesson, I think will be your best course of action. Aiden says, I've been following David Goggins for a while now, and he's really inspirational. But I feel like he borders on dangerous at times. What are your thoughts on Goggins or others to follow for inspiration? Yeah, I've read some stuff on David Goggins, and one of my favorite books, actually, if you haven't read it, is called Living with a SEAL. And I think it's what really brought David Goggins to the forefront. It's this guy named Jesse Itzler, I think, wrote this book. He hired David Goggins to live with him for a month and put him through his paces. And I love that book. It was so much fun. It was so hardcore. And David Goggins definitely is a very tough, inspiring, hardcore guy. Like, yeah, I mean, hard to keep up with. Now, does he border on dangerous? Well, probably, yeah. Like, understand that the background he's coming from and the years that he's put into being fit and tough and all these things. I mean, he was a Navy SEAL, and he really has a deep history of his body being used to those things. So I think if you saw some of the stuff he does and then you're like, I want to do that too, but you're coming off the couch, it's probably not the wisest thing. Maybe you need to be a little more progressive about how you get there. So maybe rather than emulating some of the things exactly what he's doing, because yes, there might be some danger in putting yourself in precarious situations or physically exerting yourself in a way that maybe your body's not ready for. Maybe what you can take inspiration from is, the attitude and mentality that he brings to things, which I think is probably what most people like to take from that. And it's, basically he's just like, we're capable of lots of things that maybe we don't think we can. We're tougher than we think we are. There's lots of really good stuff there without necessarily putting yourself at risk. So I think that's maybe what I would take. When I read these books, that's kind of what I took. I was like, this is such a great reminder that we're capable of so much more than we often do. And we're capable of being tougher than we often are. And I like that message probably more than anything. Oh, good. Aiden says, yes, I loved Living with a SEAL. It was so good. It really was good. And Jesse Itzler, I listened to the audiobook, and Jesse Itzler reads it, and he's got quite a comical voice. He's very fun to listen to, and I really enjoyed it. There was some humor there, and of course lots of humility, and then being introduced to this character, David Goggins, quite fascinating, quite an inspiring guy from the standpoint that really able to push himself, which is kind of cool. So these have been amazing questions today. As always, I'm grateful for people getting in here and sharing some questions. It's awesome. It always brings up such good stuff. I don't at this time see any more questions. If you do have one, pop it in there right now. Otherwise, that's probably a wrap for today. What was I going to follow up on? I'm forgetting. There was something I needed to follow. Something from last time was whether steam baths and saunas help you recover. And I've been delinquent on finding the answer to that. I will do so. And anything else that pops up, I'll do my research. But that looks like all the questions for today. So once again, thank you. If you want to review this question and answer, it's recorded. You can find it at the My Endurance Hub space, which we hope you jump in there for. And we'll be back same time, same place next week, 10:30 Pacific Standard Time in here in our My Endurance Hub space. So really appreciate your time. Really appreciate the questions. Thank you so much, everybody. And we'll see you next week. Have a great week. Happy training.